Annalee Kruger has spent her entire 28 plus year career in the senior care service industry, and she's become a nationally recognized expert in the field of senior care planning. I could spend hours talking about all the people she's helped and the interviews she's given and the people she's taught and her passion, but we're just going to go right into this, and I'm going to let you learn for yourself as you get to know Annalee better. Growing up, Annalee witnessed firsthand her parents transitioning from being adult children to caregivers for her grandparents who resided in her home for a while. And from an early stage, she wanted to be a social worker in order to serve families with aging ones. Annalee has dedicated her life to helping families to have the best possible outcome through their family and senior care planning. And she has given multiple speaking engagements. You can find her all over the internet and listen to her in multiple ways. But after hearing her story and reading her book, I knew that I wanted to have her on our show. And I'm so flattered and so honored that she's agreed to be with us today. She shares truth about caregiving, about family dynamics, way beyond what we know, yet more than what we really know, but not more than we realize. She'll leave you thinking, oh my gosh, she's so right. I should have thought of that. And yes, I guess I need to do that. But she will show you that planning actually can make caregiving easier and better for us all. Not only for those of us in the older years, but those of us who are the adult children of aging parents or family members who need to be working through this. Caregiving does not, you may not believe this, but caregiving does not have to be a total sacrifice of the caregiver. It can be a positive experience if there is an aging in place plan, which she's going to tell us about. So I don't know about you, our listeners and viewers, but I'm pretty sure that most of us have never thought about an aging in place plan or even where to start. We find ourselves in difficult situations. We get that phone call where somebody needs to do something right away. And then we will wish we knew and had done what Annalee's going to tell us about today. Annalee, you are an inspiration to me and to all of us. And when I read the beginning of your book, which was a letter to your mom, I had to get out some Kleenex, and I'm one of many who have been through these experiences. And so we're really glad that you're with us today. I'm so excited that our listeners and our viewers will get to learn from you and hear from you in person.
Well, thank you.
Tell us, when I say, and by the way, we have something in common. We both were candy stripers.
Yeah, I don't know that younger people even know what those are. And they don't have them anymore on long-term care.
Yeah, so candy, yeah, I wanted to be a candy striper, and I was the first one in our hospital, as you might have been in yours. I'll never forget my school friend, Eileen Delahanty, and I were candy stripers together. So tell us about your background, because your story is so impressive, so inspiring, and it goes back to your grandparents and then to your own mom. So tell us a little bit about what brought you to where you are today.
Yeah. So, and just a gazillion thank yous, Valerie, for having me on your show today. I really want to spread the word to families all across the globe about aging planning so that they don't get caught blindsided when those medical changes happen with either themselves or their aging parents. And I just really am on a mission to try to help families have the best possible care outcomes and family relationship outcomes and quality of life outcomes. So as you mentioned, so I'm 52 years old, and back in the day when we were growing up on the farm in Iowa, back in the 70s, they didn't have all the different kinds of care options like they do now. They didn't have independent living, assisted living. And so my grandparents, we were blessed to have my mom's mom and my dad's dad end up living with us on the farm because, well, they were both widowed, but because we didn't want to have them go into a nursing home, and times were very different back then. They didn't have resident rights back in the 70s. It was like it was an awful place. No one ever wants to, even to this day, ever have to think about putting their loved one into a long-term care community. But I was blessed in that in my childhood, my grandparents were actively involved in our childhood. And then in third grade, it just, I always say this, God spoke to me and he's like, you need to be working with aging people in your life. And so then my mom was a Girl Scout teacher. So of course she
Sure, yeah,
volunteered us for a lot of different things, which at the time
sure.
I always was not happy about. But you know what? All of her nudging and all these kind of forced volunteer opportunities as a candy striper and other things really helped me identify that I want to work with the aging population. So then I got my social work degree and worked in long-term care communities and what's called continuing care retirement communities that have all the different levels of care. I did
Right,
that for 22 years as a social worker, as an admissions director and marketing director, and eventually an executive director. But back then, 30 years ago, one person did like all of those roles. Nowadays there's a marketing director for each level of care. There's an executive director. It wasn't like that back then. So part of my job was always to do the tours of the campus, whether it's independent living, skilled rehab, the memory care unit. And every day for the 22 years I worked in that as an employee in long-term care, I had the same experience. It was a variation of the same thing, but adult kids got thrust into having to make big decisions on behalf of their parent. Mom fell, she broke her hip. She's the caregiver to dad with dementia. Kids are like, oh my gosh, what are we supposed to do? We need to be at the hospital to help for mom, but what do we do with dad? And then the next thing they know, the discharge planner is saying, here's a list of facilities, go find one by noon tomorrow because we're discharging your mom. And the kids have no idea what to do. So they all literally for 22 years, every single family came through the door. They're just totally blindsided. They had no idea what questions to ask, what to look for. And the tour would take about an hour to 2 hours. But then when I would ask them, do your parents have a living will, power of attorney, long-term care insurance? Is your dad a veteran? They have no idea. So after 22 years I was like, wow, there is a problem here. So the tour would take a couple of hours, but then I was spending another 2 or 3 hours at a time with these families, just educating them because they truly were clueless.
yeah,
And so in
truly.
2011, I decided enough of corporate America and decided to start my own company, Care Right Incorporated, and went virtual intentionally right away in 2011, because by then families just didn't live down the street from each other, right? You got kids in California, Ohio, dads in Tucson, moms in Florida, kids are everybody's scattered. So the only way that I can help these families was to leverage technology. And back then in 2011, we only had Skype. And so when I would, get the referral, when the families would seek us out, they're like, oh, I don't want to have to drive all the way back to Milwaukee because that's where I was when I started my company, or fly back to Milwaukee. I just got home and I was in Milwaukee for 2 weeks trying to figure out what to do with mom and dad.
Yeah.
I was like, you don't have to fly or drive anywhere. Like I'm a farm kid, work smarter, not harder, right? We leverage technology.
Yes, yeah, of course.
And so the kids were always like, really, I don't have to fly anywhere? And I'm like, no, as long as you have the internet or the phone, we can do Skype. And they're like, oh, so that's what we do, aging planning. And honestly, most of it is crisis management. Despite my best efforts at trying to get families to plan ahead, the reality is 92% of our families come to us in crisis mode, caregiver burnout, kids finally realizing, oh, I guess mom's dementia is getting worse. It's always kind of, no one calls because things are going well, I should say.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us what brought you to writing your book.
So,
and let me just show it here, because at the end of the show, by the way, we're going to give out 25 copies of your book. So we want everyone to see The Invisible Patient.
Yep. So I wrote the book, The Invisible Patient, The Emotional, Financial, and Physical Toll on Family Caregivers, because in my 30 some year career, I've had thousands of family members say, I love mom and dad. I just don't know what to do. They're aging. We can't keep flying back and forth to wherever. I wish there was a what to do with mom and dad guidebook. And after hearing that about 200 times, I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to have to put that on my to-do list, is write a book on what to do with mom and dad.
Yeah. And I will say that your book is definitely a guide.
It is a
It's
guide.
an introduction to a lot of things, but it's definitely a guide, right?
Well, and it was meant, yeah, it's definitely because I wanted to give the reader as much information as possible. And my publisher was like, we want it to be 90 pages, no more. And I was like, yeah, well, this is aging, caregiving, dementia, end of life, long-term care. There's no way I can condense that into 90 pages. And so a lot of it is really just checklists, because I know that I'm going to have, it's like description and information, but a lot of just checklists, like a lot of down and dirty information, because I know that I'm going to have two readers. I'm going to have the reader that reads it cover to cover, like a book, but I'm also going to have those crisis families who are like, oh, where's the chapter about crisis? Or where's the chapter about looking at care communities? Or what's this grab and go binder that she keeps talking about? So that way they can just like skip around to whatever sections mean the most to them at that time.
And the grab and go binder almost sounds like illegal. Right? I keep thinking of grab and go. That's like we have here in the stores in Los Angeles, where you're not supposed to be doing that. So let me just assure everybody that it is something that you do want. Let's go back for a second and talk about caregiver, because I know, and look, I'm a little older than you are. Sorry to say, going bad or good or bad, I guess. But nursing homes, from what I knew, and I'm from the Midwest also, nursing homes was kind of at the end of life kind of place. People sat there in rocking chairs in bathrobes, and they ate, whatever they were given. And of course, we know that care communities, facilities are much different than that now. But let's talk about caregiving, because caregiving also then to me means you are like a nurse, right? And yet my mom is 104, and I have become, to me, 105 in October, but I have become her caregiver. I never would think I would call myself a caregiver, but reading your book, there are so many different levels of being a caregiver, family or paid or not. So let's talk about that. Who are caregivers? What does that mean?
So to start, 58% of adult kids, according to a CUNA study, 58% of adult children end up thrust into the role of family caregiving without ever having any kind of family meeting about it, right? That's most people. And I think that number is actually higher, because every single one of my clients, and my clients, the whole family, but every single one of mine since 2011 is that very same statistic. They got thrust into caregiving. They're like, we have no idea what we're doing. Mom has, dementia. They don't understand dementia at all. Or, they don't have maybe the adult kids or the spouse, the healthy spouse, maybe they don't have the personality to be a caregiver. And that's okay too. Not everybody is wired to be a caregiver, or maybe that relationship that they've had through the course of years isn't very conducive to wanting to take care of someone who maybe wasn't the best person they could have been to you as a family member. So when we talk about family caregiving, like I said, most people get thrust into the role of family caregiving without ever talking about the what whens of aging. And that's why we do aging planning, to solve for all these problems. But the reality is sometimes it starts out feeling manageable. Like, okay, well, mom she's got a broken hip. So for 6 weeks, we can just like suck it up as a family and like pitch in and do what she needs done and get the groceries or help her set up her meds or whatever it is. But then, but that still doesn't make it easy, because that means someone's going to have to, probably take a flight, because again, people don't live near each other anymore, or they have to miss work, or they have to file for PTO or FMLA because they're like, how long is this going to go on? Or maybe, maybe the adult kid, maybe it's an only child, and they're like, I can't get away from work, or my spouse is sick with cancer and I need to be there for him or her, or I have a special needs child and I can't just like easily drop what I'm doing to go come to the rescue to mom and dad. So caregiving can start out feeling like it's manageable or doable. Oh yeah, so dad has therapy sessions 3 times a week and then he'll be fine. Well, then dad falls again or he has another stroke, and then what? And so caregiving can be like setting up medications, taking time off work to go coordinate doctor's appointments or to go with them to doctor's appointments, setting up medications, just even calling and checking and reminding them, are you okay? Did you take your pills today? That kind of thing. But it then also progresses, and this is where families get themselves in a jam if they don't have an aging plan, because they don't think beyond today or think beyond tomorrow. And then what is it when mom or dad need more care than what you're physically able to do? Like my dad is 6'4", and when he had his stroke, he would have needed 2 people, and there's no warning. Well, there's no warning with strokes, right? Like thousands of people get that call that, hey, your dad had a stroke yesterday. Well, no one expected to have a stroke. Well, guess what? And so, so when you get thrust into that caregiving, it gets really overwhelming very quickly. And not everybody is cut out to be a nurse or a CNA, doing catheter changes or, colostomy changes or skin wound treatments. Not everybody is cut out for that, or having to do injections, for diabetes.
So then caregivers are really anybody who gives care, whether it's a family member or not.
That's right. Yep.
And
most of it's unpaid too. Most of it's unpaid.
I get that. Yeah, absolutely. 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 Yeah. And we got the call, and you talk about in your book about how, someone gets a call just as I did from a hospital who says, your dad's here and we're discharging him. I said, wait a second, we don't have a place to put him. You're the hospital. You're supposed to keep him, right? Until he gets well. No, you've got about 4 hours. Well, what do we do? So then we found a care community building facility. And then he was there 10 days. And they said, okay, he's done here. Well, now what do I do? And had no idea. And I also, like you, then realized I can't be the only person this age in this situation who has this same challenge. And that's certainly, I can totally relate to that. And I feel so sorry for people who are, because I know it exists.
Right. And it's, I call it the caregiver snowball, because some people were already caregivers to maybe, the husband's family, and now your own family member has a stroke or wanders away from the house. Like we had that down here in Naples. A woman got away from her husband and she was missing for 6 days. She ended up getting locked into a neighbor's garage and he had no idea she was in there. So these are the kinds of things that happen, and then families are like, oh my gosh, what do we do? And so that's why I almost beg people, like, if you want to have the best outcomes, we have to be putting a plan in place. You have to understand the disease that you're working with, like dementia. Most families are like, well, if dad's dementia gets worse. So that only tells me that they aren't aware of what this disease is. And so when we talk about the caregiver snowball, it starts out feeling manageable until it isn't. And then what? And this is also, when you have these crisis scenarios, it's a stress test on the family relationships to really see who's going to be there and help out and who's not.
Let's talk about your plan, your aging plan. This came from your experience. And what is an aging plan?
So an aging plan is where we facilitate family meetings, because we know that families don't like to talk about the what whens of aging, and so they don't. That's why they're always in crisis mode when they come to us. And even if they liked talking about it, they really wouldn't know what to talk about in the first place. And this is why, because most families are very uninformed. For example, they tend to think that Medicare is going to pay for everything. And so when we're working with them and I'm like, okay, well, your goal is to age in place at home. That's great. But that means then that you have $30,000 to $40,000 a month to pay for care. And they're always like, what? We thought that's the next sentence is we thought Medicare pays for all of this,
Sure.
or they'll say like assisted living and skilled rehab or skilled nursing and memory care in the same sentence as if it's the same level of care, and it's not, And so you can't expect consumers or families to put their own plan in place because they're not educated enough to be able to do so. And that's shame on our healthcare industry for making things so complicated that you can't just be like, okay, so this is what she needs now. It's like all those levels you just talked about, like, oh, there was a crisis, he's in the hospital, now he's got to go to rehab, now where, all of that happens very quickly. And one of the messages I try to get through on these types of podcasts and interviews is we have to stop being in denial, meaning none of us get healthier as we age. We don't get more able-bodied. We don't get more mobile. We don't get more cognizant. No. We don't get better as we age. And so we need to just be realistic and say, you know what, if I want to have a say in what happens to me as I age, and if I don't want to be a burden on my kids, then I better be putting an aging plan in place so that I understand what are my care options, how much is it going to cost, what can I afford, where does it make sense for me to live if I can't stay at home, does it even make sense for me to live at home, do I have the $30,000 to $40,000 a month to be able to afford home care because I want to age in place at home? Well, that's great, but what if you can't find the care workers? I have a client that we've had to use we're partnering with, well, we aren't, but the family has had to retain 4 different home care companies to be able to have them all work together to be able to staff the 24/7 that their parent wants because they want to age in place at home. Families don't understand the plight of our senior care industry, especially post-COVID, where there is a massive shortage of quality healthcare workers. So that's great that Ethel might want to age in place at home, but that doesn't mean that she can afford it. And that doesn't mean that she can find quality workers. Because what if that care worker doesn't show up for a 12-hour shift? How is she going to get fed, toileted, bathed, her medications, all of that kind of stuff? So there's just a lot that families need to think about. And that's what we do with an aging plan, is just educate you, and we do our due diligence and our market research of these different care facilities so that you don't put your loved one in a known abuse situation. So we have a whole due diligence process that we use with our families so that they can make informed decisions and be like, okay, here are 5 to 8 different options for care. Here's what their waiting lists look like. Here's how much you have to have in net worth to financially qualify. Here's what levels of care they offer so that if mom needs assisted living and dad needs memory care, we don't want them in a separate facility, right? We want them on the same campus. Sure. So it's really a lot of education that we do in an aging plan so that families can make informed decisions, but also learn to communicate better. What I mean by that is, because 92% of our families come to us in crisis, 85% of those families, I'm doing family mediation, because by the time they come to us or get referred to us, they're not getting along. They don't understand, everybody has their own idea of what quality of life is, how sick is mom and dad, or how their inheritance should be spent.
Sure. And so that's important, right? Yeah.
So if those relationships were bad going into this whole aging and caregiving journey, they're not going to magically improve on their own. So that's why that neutral third-party person, who's actually a healthcare and dementia expert, is the best route to go, because then we can help the families make informed decisions and get along as well as they can, so that we can keep our focus on what mom and dad's needs are.
And I can only imagine the dynamics of being in some of those family meetings.
It's hard, it's really painful because it's just sad. It's just sad all the way around because it just seems like families are just constantly blindsided. It doesn't seem to cross families' minds of, oh, mom and dad, mom's already had 4 falls, or dad's been in the hospital, or dad just got a diagnosis of cancer. It doesn't seem that most families take it that next step of, oh, we should
No.
probably put a plan in place, right? They just keep their head buried in the sand. And I am asking you all that are listening to this, please don't do that, because then you're going to end up a crisis family. So it is sad because a lot of times these families, brother Jerry said something stupid at Thanksgiving 20 years ago. And so that broke the whole family. And now that mom had a stroke or dad has dementia, they're like, oh, what are we supposed to do? And they can't even have a civil conversation together, let alone, so then here I am like, hi, I'm Annalee, and we're gonna fix all this, and we do. And then they feel really terrible that they wasted so much time and energy being so angry and missed relationship opportunities. Like some of these, their kids never met each other because of some family conflict that was decades ago. Whereas if I can catch these families in the infancy stages of resentment and discord, it's a lot easier for everybody. If I can just catch families more proactively and say, look, if you have aging parents, we need to be talking because it's just a matter of time before there's a fall or a hospital visit or some disease progression. Let's get ahead of it so that you know what the current and future care options can be based on what they can afford. You know what documents are in order and which ones are missing so that you're not having to shell out 20 grand in legal fees because you didn't know that your parents didn't have advanced directives in place. So it's really, yeah, it's going to cost money to put an aging plan in place, but it's going to cost way more time, energy, and money if they don't.
So along with that, it kind of seems that we can talk people into, although enough of them don't, we can talk them into doing a will, and we can convince some of them that they need to do a trust or some other element. But this idea of an aging plan, it seems to be relatively new. Is that not true?
Well, I've been doing this since 2011, and still to this day, knock on wood, I don't have any competition. There isn't anyone
No.
out here doing comprehensive aging planning. There's companies that do bits and pieces. Like sometimes people are like, well, I have a geriatric care manager that I work with. And I'm like, well, that's great. They set up your meds, they go with your mom to the appointments, which is super great. But there's no plan beyond like, okay, so did they work with you on, okay, here's tour, let's tour these different care communities. Let's get your name on the waiting list. Let's learn how to be a bold advocate. No, there's too many, there's a lot of companies out there that do bits and pieces, but no one's putting everything together and no one's maintaining that long-term relationship. And that's what the key is that long-term relationship. Because when Care Right comes into these families' journeys, we're coming into them at a really vulnerable, scary time because they are coming to us in crisis and emotions are raw, very raw. Time is limited to make really big and properly informed decisions. But unfortunately, that's what most families, that's the condition, I guess, of most families when they come to us. Instead of, hey, you know what, mom's had a hospital stay, I am risk averse, let's get ahead of this because we know that this is just the tip of the iceberg and let's put a plan in place. And people don't understand how quickly it can go, caregiving can go from feeling okay to like now feeling full-blown anger, resentment. I didn't retire to take care of dad, or my sisters don't help out at all, and how come I'm getting the brunt of all of this and missing all this work, or and that's where those family relationships really go sideways really quickly. And that's why I keep saying, please, let's talk now and let's put a plan in place instead of waiting until you're in crisis mode, because then you get whatever care options are available. And I promise you, they're not going to be good. And you're not going to feel confident in the care decisions that you made because you're making it on the fly instead of having the opportunity of having it be a well thought out decision. And that's key.
Yeah, and I can only imagine and with blended families, I've seen you I saw you write about blended
That's a whole
families.
nother book.
So, oh, I'm sure. So yeah, that was my mom has only been married to your dad for 10 years. And, now you want to use our inheritance and, but what they don't realize is that money's going to disappear anyway. If they have to spend it on care, it's going to disappear. Right.
Well, there's that, but there's also, and this is really for a lot of families that are blended that I work with, their main money's always kind of in the background, right? Whether it's a $500 inheritance or a 5 million, but a lot of the families I work with, say it's a blended family and they've only been married 10 years or 15 years. A lot of times it's not until this particular crisis, the stroke, that the kids actually met each other because mom and dad got married on a cruise. And so now the kids don't even know each other and they have no idea what's in place, but they'll say, well, I don't want my mom getting sick as a caregiver, taking care of your dad. So I'm going to move my mom over with us. And then you guys are going to have to figure out what to do with your dad. And so that's why those mediations are always tricky as well, because you want to honor where everybody is at in this situation and how they feel. But we also need to stay front and center of, okay, we're in crisis, so let's get through this crisis and then we can build out more of a longer term plan. But right now someone needs care and they need it fast.
So do you ever have people that actually meet with you before they get sick?
So 8%, 92% of my families are in crisis mode. Which means 8% are how I categorize them, where they aren't in crisis because we're not having to now work at 7 or 8 o'clock at night doing a family meeting because they're proactive, right? Or they're not burned out or they're not overwhelmed yet because they're actually still getting along as a family. And so only like a small percentage of them end up coming proactively. And that's again why I wrote the book, to kind of say it's kind of a scared straight program. Like, hey, this is gonna happen to you. Let's just be realistic. So if I could I would be so happy if those statistics were turned around where it was 92% proactive and 8% crisis, but I have a lot of work left to do.
Yeah, I can imagine. And while it's great that you don't have a lot of competition, it's kind of sad that you don't. I've heard you talk about your passion for this. What would you like to, we're kind of skipping ahead here, but what would you like to do with this mission, this passion of yours?
So my mission is, and it's a bodacious one, but I'm up for it. I'm a stalwart farm kid, so I'm up for it. But my mission is truly leave no family caregiver or their senior/vulnerable adult, which is in my line of work, dementia patients or people who are truly at the mercy of someone else for any kind of care need. My mission is leave no family caregiver nor their aging loved one behind. Every family needs to have something that we offer at Care Right, whether it's a care matrix or just help with family meeting or the full-blown care, the full-blown aging plan. Or just the grab and go binder, the checklist that comes along with that digital grab and go. Everybody needs something that I offer because my goal is that caregiving does not have to derail your life, your career, your marriage, your work, your finances, your relationships all across the board with your siblings, your spouse, the care recipient. When you actually have an aging plan in place, you understand what the care options are, you understand how care is paid, you understand and you have a plan of, okay, if this happens, this is what we're going to do. Or, finding out proactively that, oh, we don't, mom and dad do have long-term care insurance. Great. What does it actually pay? Getting all of those documents in order is just as important. And that's why it's part of that aging plan process. So my goal is reach as many family members as I can. There's over 350 million family caregivers across the globe. And so that's why I wrote the book. That's why I do all these podcasts, because that's my way of trying to educate consumers and say, don't wait until you're in crisis mode. And I do want to say crisis, because I say that all the time, but even when families come to us, it's
Mhm.
clear to me that they're in crisis, but they don't identify as being in crisis, even though they're on the 30-minute consult sobbing about how, dad's stroke has affected their relationships, their finances, their job, their job. They're sobbing on the phone, or they're like, oh, I haven't had a decent night's sleep because mom's dementia progressed. And they're sitting there crying, or talking about how their life is turned upside down, and they still don't identify that that is what's called a crisis. Because then I'll say, well, how long have you been doing this, whatever this is, the caregiving piece, and how much more grit do you have left in you? And they're like, oh, if I had to do this another month, I don't know what I would do. I would go crazy. I would lose my mind. So even when I ask them those kind of exploratory questions, it's not until like I'm like the fifth or sixth question down that they're like, oh, this is a crisis. So that's a lot of education that has to be out there as well, is what is crisis when you don't have enough grit in you to keep doing what you're doing.
And don't you think that part of that is, though, that they don't know what's coming? Like in our situation, we had no idea. We put my dad into a board and care, and we said, well, this is okay, and we can afford this if he only lives a month or two or six. But after that, and of course, you have no idea. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, my dad passed away in a month. But for other families, they have no idea what to expect. We don't know generally. In some cases, maybe you know the life expectancy, but sometimes you don't. And that makes it so. How do you plan for that?
Well, because that's why you plan for best case scenario and worst case scenario. So some of the mistakes that I see families make because they try to do
Yes,
this on their own instead of just work with a professional to help them with all this care decisions. They'll try to Google it or ask neighbor Joe what
sure.
they did. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. But people do what they do. And so a lot of mistakes, but for just to keep it condensed, mistakes I see families making is not being cognizant to the fact that none of us get healthier as we age. So being in denial about what this aging journey is going to look like. So being in denial about the what whens of aging, not having their grab and go information updated and in one place. You know, not finding out that the last thing you want to find out is, oh, dad had a stroke, and oh, he didn't have a living will or a power of attorney, and now he's
Yeah,
hooked up to these machines to stay alive, when that's not what he wanted, but he never got his paperwork documented, right? And so not having their digital grab and go, families not talking or being resistant to the idea of talking about the what whens of aging on both parts, because sometimes mom and dad want to say, hey kids, I want to talk to you about what we have in order, and the kids will be like, no, because that might jinx some sort of terrible medical thing, or vice versa, where the kids are like, look dad, you just got out of the hospital. Well, we made it through this crisis. We know that it's just like this isn't going to be the one and only hospital stay. Let's talk about this thing. And then the parents might have that resistance as well, so not wanting to like actually have any conferring happening between mom and dad and adult kids. Other examples of mistakes are families assuming they know what they're doing, and then they don't. So they
I
assume
know.
they don't know what the differences in care levels are, like assisted living, memory care, and nursing homes. So they're going about all of this blindly to then find out they made terrible decisions because they didn't know what they didn't know. Example, I had a lady, she only had $68,000 to her name. And the daughter didn't want to spend any money on an aging plan. So she's like, well, I'll just figure this out on my own. And I'm like, okay, but there's a lot you need to know. And so what the daughter did was she put her mom into what was in reality an assisted living facility, but the daughter thought it was a nursing home because there was a call light on the wall. So that was how the daughter thought that a nursing home would be. And I'm like, ugh. So what she ended up doing was she put her mother into assisted living. Well, then the assisted living was like, well, we after like she was there a month or two, they're like, we can't take care of her anymore because it was a month to month rental. And they're like, well, you need to move your mom into a nursing home because that's the level of care she needs
Sure.
now.
Right.
Well, now mom doesn't qualify to get into financially to get into a nursing home because she was in that assisted living for 3 months at $6,000 a month. So now she's $18,000 less. And so she didn't have enough financially to get into a decent nursing home. So that's why I always talk to families like, it's there's just a lot that you have to unpack with this whole aging and caregiving and care options. And that's why, unfortunately, families make so many preventable mistakes.
And we could talk to you. In fact, I'm listening to this and talking with you here. I think we need to do this again. We need to have at least one more session together. But I do want to talk about your grab and go package. And then I want to talk about a special surprise you have for everybody to talk about. Yeah. So we have about maybe about 10 minutes left.
Yep. So the grab and go is critical because, again, most families don't know what they have in order. And my goal is that the whole family do their grab and go binder, right? Get all of their affairs in order. What do you have for long-term care insurance or life insurance? Do you have, what's your car insurance? What is all of the stuff that you have in order? And that's what I like about the digital grab and go that I created way back in 2011. Because that way it's truly just fill out all of these forms that are part of the checklist that's in the digital grab and go. And a lot of people will say, well, Annalee, I'm working with a financial advisor and I have long-term care insurance and I have my estate documents in order. That's all I need. And I'm like, wow, no, that is not all you need, because your kids are going to end up stepping in, having to be, act as your power of attorney. Do they know your bank accounts? Are they listed on your bank? What do you already have in place? Do they know that you have long-term care insurance? So it's a huge checklist of everything that you need to have in order. There's a pet section in there because a lot of people have pets. And what do they do when mom goes into the hospital for 4 weeks because she had a stroke? Or there's a business succession plan section in there too, because this grab and go is for anybody over the age of 18. So, and I have 4 businesses. So when something happens to me, my family needs to know, who do I use for payroll? Who's my corporate attorney? All that kind of stuff. And I had my own crisis at 44 days after my 40th birthday. I had just returned from China from doing a keynote speaker event at a health conference. And I was in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, crossing the street with a little 82-year-old gentleman. He yelled, "Watch out." And the next thing I knew, I was getting up off the street. I got hit by a school bus. She was, as a pedestrian, she was distracted by the kids on the bus, blew through a 4-corner stop. I carry my healthcare power of attorney. I carry my do not resuscitate. And I carry, thankfully, I only have 2 medication allergies, but I carry that because God forbid something happens to me. I don't want to end up with tubes and hoses and machines to keep me alive. And the paramedics, when they picked me up there, and I'm like, here's my power of attorney, here's my living will. And they're like, I wish everybody carried their documents with them, because then the professionals know what to do or what not to do.
And that's an amazing story. After reading that, I thought about that and I was amazed. In fact, I told this story at a family gathering that you were able to step up and say to everybody, okay, you call this person, you call this person, you call this person, and here's what you need to do, and there's what you need to do. And that was amazing.
But that's because I was lucky that I didn't have, thank God, I didn't have a head injury. But for those people, I was out driving yesterday and someone on a motorcycle got hit. And all I can pray is I sure hope that they have their grab and go, that their family knows what their wishes are and that they have all those documents in place, because that accident didn't look good. And I certainly didn't wake up on May 3rd of 2012 thinking, oh, I'm going to get hit by a school bus today and be laid up.
No, I'm sure you didn't.
Right? Just like all the people who had major strokes 2 weeks ago didn't wake up thinking I'm going to have a major stroke. So I know it's not fun, but it's less fun when that crisis happens and you're completely ill prepared, because it is preventable.
Yeah, absolutely. And so many other things, like a spouse passes away and the other one is the one that passed away is the one that always paid the bills, or the one that always ran the business. And now all of a sudden they're disrupted. And I think that's one of the saddest things in life, is when those things happen to someone and they were just totally unprepared and can't go back and get that information.
Yeah. And that's why we talk about that, especially with, with our dementia patients too, is especially if dad was the one that take care of all the bills and stuff, well, he's going to be losing capacity. And if he's the only one with that information, we need to get it out of him now.
Yeah. So let's talk about where can people find you,
So they
and is the this preparedness package something they can buy from you?
Yeah, so they can actually go to carerightinc.com, and that's CARERIGHTINC.com. You can actually get the digital grab and go right off the website. I have services and products for literally every budget. Like the book, The Invisible Patient, is $20. I've got a do-it-yourself aging guide, which is bundle packed with the grab and go, but that's very clunky, but it's for people who think that they can put their own plan in place. At least it's a 90-page here's what you need to do.
Starting point. Sure.
It's the starting point. But the reality is most people need the actual white glove approach consulting that we do, because they're in crisis, and Google will only get you so far. And so that's
ChatGPT isn't probably too good at that either.
Yeah, ChatGPT. Yeah, I would never rely on ChatGPT. so yeah, if they go to the website now, granted, the website is getting redone with color and kind of rebranding with just different colors and updating some of the service offerings on there, but that is available. And I do have a free family caregivers only family caregiver Facebook group. It's called Care Right Family Caregiver Solutions Facebook group. So it's solutions. It's not to complain about being burned out. It's about solutions.
We have about 3 minutes, and I don't want to let the show end without you telling people about your cruise.
So I partnered with a travel agent who's a nurse by background, and she's also a certified travel agent. And we offer dementia-friendly cruises. So this is ideal for families who have a loved one with memory impairment and still want to travel. It is white glove approach, meaning Kathy, the travel agent, who's also a nurse, has a whole team of healthcare professionals who join on this cruise. So while mom or dad, whomever it is that has memory impairment or dementia, they're in adult daycare programming, having fun.
Oh.
While I have the family caregivers in sessions with me, learning about aging planning, caregiver burnout, preventing caregiver burnout, how to still feel like you had meaningful visits with your loved one who has memory impairment, and just getting reconnected and recharged as a family caregiver. And so that cruise is November 30th out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, until December 7th, and it's a Caribbean cruise.
Okay.
So if you go to the Care Right Inc. website, there's actually a pop-up box that you can click on, and you can get more information if you're interested. Now, this is August 5th today. We only have until the end of August 2024 to be able to sell these cabins on the cruise. Because then the cruise line shuts down ticket sale.
Yeah. Well, so everyone who's listening or viewing, please be sure and go check out this cruise. Great opportunity, and what a fun activity for the family as well. And a nice getaway where people can take a break from their caregiving activities or challenges or responsibilities and do something special.
And I do want to add, because most of the calls that we've been getting are, well, mom is already in a memory care facility. Is it too late that, that she can't come with? And we're like, no, we've got people in wheelchairs. We have people on hospice that come to these cruises.
Oh, that's great.
Because for a lot of these families, it very well could be the last family cruise that they get to enjoy together. So it's a really magical opportunity if you're looking for, a holiday cruise, with your family. So
thank you so much for being with us today. Our time's flown by. I'm sorry that we don't have more time to be with you, but I think we should have you back again, and we will. And I would love to have you come out to the West Coast and do some events with you, some community workshops. So that would be nice also. So if any of our viewers and listeners want to reach Annalee, it is at
carerightinc.com is the easiest way to reach me, because then you can fill out the contact us card, or you can schedule a time on our calendar if you want to learn more about what an aging plan is for you and your family, what that could look like.
Great. And we're going to give away 20 copies of her book. So if you email me at valeriev.com, the first 20 people will get a free copy of her book. And that will be also on the bottom of our show when it's aired on Cami T. Thank you very much for being with us. It's been our pleasure. Thank you so much. And
Thank
we'll
you,
talk to
Valerie.
you soon.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.